My name coming out your mouth, then I feel flattered. Cause when they stop talking about you, then you don't matter. Since yay high, young and used to stay fly. Never snitched the rule, a lot of y'all forgot to play by.
An investigation of this magnitude requires significant cooperation, communication, coordination, and resources for all those involved and the communities impacted to be safe and to have a successful outcome. This investigation became a multi-agency investigation targeting the illegal drug trafficking organization headed by Andrew Lloyd and Jarrell Brown, both of Newark, Delaware. And the investigation concluded on November 25, 2014, with the execution of search warrants at 17 different resident locations throughout Newcastle County, and resulted in the arrest or indictment of 44 individuals on 330 drug and weapons offenses.
In all of my years in law enforcement, I have never seen the kind of cooperation that exists among the agencies represented here today. This is, as I said, the dawn of a new era. I am confident that we can make the streets of Delaware, all of Delaware, and in particular the city of Wilmington, a safer place when we work together as we have today.
In the mid-2000s, Wilmington, Delaware was drowning under the weight of heroin. The drug crisis had carved deep scars into the community. Families were falling apart, overdoses were spiking, and violence seemed to shadow every block of the city. People were scared to walk the streets. Mothers buried their sons. Neighbors whispered about shootings that happened in broad daylight. Wilmington wasn't just another city with a drug problem. It was labeled one of the most dangerous places in America. And in the middle of this chaos, police, prosecutors, and federal agents were working quietly behind the scenes to bring down what they believed was one of the largest and most violent drug trafficking networks in the state's history. They called it Operation Sun Sun. The investigation stretched across nearly a year. It wasn't a quick bust or a lucky traffic stop. This was a methodical, calculated campaign. It required patience, wiretaps, surveillance, undercover work, and intelligence sharing between multiple agencies. From the outside, life in Wilmington looked unchanged. Dealers still roamed the corners, addicts still searched for their next high, and gunshots still cracked through the night. But behind closed doors, investigators were quietly pulling threads, trying to map out who was truly responsible for flooding the city with drugs and fear. The picture that emerged shocked even veteran agents. At the center of it all were two men, Andrew Rock Lloyd and Antoine Flock Miller. These weren't low-level hustlers trying to make quick money. They were described as organizers, leaders, men who turned Wilmington into a marketplace for heroin. Prosecutors said they ran a sophisticated operation that could transform bulk heroin into 500,000 bags of street-ready product in a single year. That meant millions of dollars in profits, enough to fuel violence, intimidation, and control over entire neighborhoods. For a city already struggling, the damage was devastating. The organization wasn't just about heroin. Guns were everywhere. Prosecutors later said the group treated Wilmington like a target practice zone. Rivalries, turf battles, and street disputes often ended with bullets flying. Residents lived in constant fear, caught between addiction and violence. Some called the city Murder Town, USA, a nickname that became infamous in national headlines. Operation Sun Sun wasn't just about stopping drugs. It was about survival for Wilmington's neighborhoods. By December 2014, investigators decided they had enough evidence to act. What followed was one of the largest coordinated sweeps in Delaware's history. More than 40 people were arrested in a single wave. Many pulled from their homes before sunrise as heavily armed police and federal agents stormed through Wilmington and Newark. Reports later said over 44 individuals were tied to the case, with more than 300 counts of charges filed. These included racketeering, conspiracy, heroin dealing, weapons charges, and organized crime offenses. Court documents painted the picture of a fully structured criminal enterprise, one that stretched beyond simple street sales into a carefully built network that relied on hierarchy, fear, and loyalty. The takedown wasn't random. Agencies worked together on a scale rarely seen. The Delaware Department of Justice, the DEA, the Wilmington Police Department, the FBI, Newcastle County Police, Delaware State Police, and Newark Police all contributed. Even probation and parole officers had roles in tracking suspects. Officials described the operation as historic, not just for the number of arrests, but for the way it united law enforcement under one cause. Attorney General Matt Dinn praised the effort as proof that the state could take on its worst criminal organizations and win. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors laid out their case. At the top of the pyramid sat Lloyd and Miller. Beneath them were lieutenants and distributors, handling bulk product and filtering it down to the street level. Below them were dealers and runners, the people addicts actually met face to face when they handed over money for tiny bags of powder. Everyone in the system played a part, from those counting cash to those carrying guns. And everyone, prosecutors argued, was accountable for the violence that shadowed Wilmington streets. The trials and pleas began rolling in. Some defendants fought, hoping to challenge wiretaps or argue their roles were exaggerated. Others folded quickly, pleading guilty to avoid maximum sentences. By late 2015, nearly every defendant had been convicted or admitted guilt. Officials announced that 46 people tied to Operation Sun Sun were either convicted at trial or had taken plea deals. That kind of success rate was rare. The state had managed to dismantle an entire network, leaving no major figure untouched. The sentences were steep. Andrew, Rock, Lloyd received 25 years in prison, followed by probation. His charges ranged from organized crime and racketeering to heroin possession, drug dealing, and weapons offenses. Antoine Flock Miller was given 20 years behind bars, also followed by probation for a similar slate of crimes. Other associates received lengthy terms as well. Brian Palmer, a Newark man tied to distribution, got 16 years. LaKenya Howard of Wilmington pleaded guilty to conspiracy and dealing. Mac Andino of Newark admitted to conspiracy, dealing, and illegal firearm possession. Dozens of others faced years of their lives erased, traded for time inside Delaware prisons. Officials framed the outcome as a turning point. They said the operation had cut deeply into Wilmington's heroin market and sent a clear message that law enforcement could and would take down entire networks. For communities, the hope was that fewer dealers meant fewer overdoses, fewer shootings, and a chance for neighborhoods to breathe again. But the deeper reality was more complicated. While the ring had been dismantled, addiction didn't disappear overnight. Demand for heroin remained. Other dealers, smaller groups, and outside suppliers still existed. For residents, life may have gotten quieter, but the struggle against opioids and violence continued. Still, Operation Sun Sun left its mark. It became one of the most celebrated investigations in Delaware history. Prosecutors called it a model for how to handle complex drug enterprises, build evidence patiently, strike decisively, and carry cases through trial. Officials highlighted the teamwork, the wiretaps, and the cooperation that made it possible. For a city long overshadowed by crime statistics, the operation was a moment to declare progress, even if only temporary. Critics, however, raised difficult questions. Did locking away dozens of people truly solve the crisis? Or did it simply create a vacuum for others to fill? Would Wilmington ever escape the cycles of poverty and addiction that fueled its underground economy? Could courts and prisons alone heal a city battered by drugs? These questions hung in the air long after the headlines faded. Because while law enforcement has celebrated a win, mothers were still grieving sons, and the next generation of young men and women faced the same temptations their predecessors had. The heroin crisis wasn't just a law enforcement problem, it was a public health emergency. And many argued that without treatment, education, and opportunity, operations like Sun Sun were only half the battle.